Hey everyone, welcome to Story Mantra. I'm your host, Anju Gattani, and we are with a fabulous author, USA Today bestselling author, Barbara Conrey, whose debut novel, Nowhere Near Goodbye. This is the digital version, and Barbara, you have the paperback?
I do. Oh, upside down.
There you are, the paperback version, and you have the title on top, USA Today bestseller. So
Yes.
Barbara's book came out a few months ago, not even a year old, and she hit the USA Today bestselling list pretty quickly. So who is Barbara Conrey? Well, apart from the fact that she's one of my best friends, Barbara Conrey is a USA Today bestselling author of Nowhere Near Goodbye, published on August 4th, 2020 by Red Adept Publishing. It's her debut novel. Previously, Barbara worked in the healthcare industry before opting for an early retirement, which lasted all of 3 months. She then accepted a finance position for which she had absolutely no background, and 4 years later, she decided to write a book, but not about finance, which explains a lot because there's a lot of medical stuff in this book, and I honestly thought Barbara was a doctor when I was reading it. Travel is Barbara's passion, along with reading, writing, hiking, and exploring antique shops. Her greatest love is Miss Molly, her adorable and cute rescue beagle. There are stories to be told about beagles, and there are beagles in the book, by the way. And Barbara hopes to incorporate some of them into her books. She lives in Pennsylvania, close to family and friends. And below the YouTube video, you will see a link with all of Barbara's social media, website, and of course the purchase link from Amazon and other places where you can purchase the book. So Barbara, could you tell us a little bit about Nowhere Near Goodbye? What's the story about?
Okay, the story started to be about a small child with cancer, and it ended up being the story of the doctor who researched and cured the cancer, but not for the little girl in the original story.
Right.
The story's about friendship. It's about decisions. It's about the balance of motherhood versus career. It's the story about mistakes. It's the story about second chances.
Mm-hmm.
It's the story of my heart. I wrote this book. I'm hoping you might want to know a little bit about why I wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine lost a family member, a 9-year-old little girl, to the brain tumor, glioblastoma. At the time this happened, I didn't even know what glioblastoma was, other than I think the first person I had known, not personally, but that I had read that had this particular kind of brain tumor was Ted Kennedy. And he died from it eventually. No one, or very rarely does anyone live from this disease. I was so heartbroken for my friend and so distraught. And for some reason, even though I had never written a book, I was still working full time. I thought, this is a book. I need to write this book. And that's where the story started. It ended with a main character who people either love or hate. Emma Blake, she was the little girl who grew up and spent her entire life researching this disease, trying to find a cure for it, which of course led me to doing a whole lot of research about the disease also. But we can talk about that whenever you're ready. But that's basically the book. I wanted to open up conversations. That was my main goal. I wanted to open up conversations about why is it that men can devote their lives to their career and maybe not to the extreme that Emma did, but people don't think twice about it.
Well,
And Emma,
people don't question.
pardon?
You're
No,
right.
they don't.
People don't question.
That's what men are supposed to do, and women are not. A woman's first role is always supposed to be the caretaker. Well, Emma was a caretaker, but not for her daughter, she was a caretaker for all the patients who needed her. And in fact, her mentor said to her, and this is one of my favorite lines, because her mentor, who happened to be Kate's father, the little girl who died, her mentor said to Emma, when she was vacillating between research and motherhood, and her mentor said, do you just want to save one child, or do you want to save hundreds, maybe thousands?
Yep.
And this was a turning point for Emma, and she devoted herself to her research, and as a byproduct lost her family because her husband just couldn't handle not having the woman he loved, and he never stopped loving her. She never stopped loving him either.
Right.
So
Right.
it's also
Well, it's more than that, Barbara. And for all of you who are either thinking about reading the book or have it downloaded, and while Barbara, the author, the woman behind the book, wanted us to think about and talk about and question so many things, when I was reading the book, um, and I came from a completely different perspective, because here I was reading this book and I was thinking, well, she's a woman on a mission to find a cure for the cancer. She's also trying to raise a little girl, Ellie. And then Emma's also trying to keep her marriage together with Tim. At the same time, she's trying to cure a cancer which killed her friend Kate years ago. But that doesn't change the fact that it's a huge loss. So, while an author writes the book from a perspective, the reader, like myself, here my perspective was, there's this one woman who's trying to save so many things. She's got so many untangled threads that she's trying to loop nicely and hold together. But the harder she tries, the more they fall apart. And she's got all these tangles in one hand, family, relationships, dynamics. And on the other hand, she's got this intelligence and this motivation to find a cure for this cancer, which can save not one life, which is already gone and it's done, but she can save thousands, hundreds and thousands more by finding a cure. The more she delves into one, the more she loses the other. And the hardest part of the story was exactly what Barbara says. Nobody questions a man when he devotes his life to something, but people question women, because there's a question of your career, is a question of your motherhood, of where do your priorities belong. And, in this scenario, the man, Tim, he's actually taking the full role of double parenting. And she, being a mom, she's there but not there, because she's trying to save all these other children. When you get to the climax, the entire story turns and you're like, okay, and I'm not going to give it away, but that's when suddenly the balance that she's been trying to strike in her entire life takes a turn. And it made me think again, so who was right and who was wrong? Well, of course, as in life, there is no right or wrong. You live your life the best way you can. But there was so much medical research also involved with the book. Barbara, I have to ask, where did you and how did you handle all the medical research involved? Because I felt I was in the OT, I was in the ER, I was in the hospital, I was home, I was exhausted from work. How did you do this?
It was hard. It was exhausting. I started at my local library, and I will tell you a true story. I would take out piles of books on cancer, on brain tumors, and I would bring them back. And before long, the librarian was looking at me like very sadly. It's like very, very sadly. And I never said anything, and she never said anything, but I could just see that she was looking at me with sympathy. Like, was I researching for a loved one? Was I researching for myself?
Right.
Of course, I did the internet. I actually watched a glioblastoma brain tumor removal on the internet. My fingers were like, my hands were like this. It was like gory.
Mm.
It was step by step. I did so much research on the internet that Johns Hopkins contacted me and said, we would be happy to send you our weekly updates on what we are doing.
Wow.
And so I had that. Unfortunately, it only helped me so far. But then again, because of the fact that in 25 years, there has been so little improvement, it actually did turn out to be helpful, because at first I thought, well, this isn't going to do me any good. This is 2019. I need something that goes back to 1980. You know, there is so little difference between what has been accomplished from 1980 till 2019 that I could incorporate some of those things into my research and into my book, from things that they provided me. Granted, yes, there has been some improvement, but when you think of what we can do medically, this tumor is horrific. This tumor, I see this tumor. This tumor is like an octopus. It literally has tentacles that reaches into healthy brain cells, which is why you cannot remove it completely. You can see I'm kind of like, you know, I'm a pretend surgeon. So this tumor has tentacles that reach into not only the diseased parts of the brain, but also healthy brain tissue, which is why you can't remove all of the tumor. So I thought, okay, there's got to be a way to do this in a pretend world. And I did. I created a pretend surgical procedure that Emma created. And I'm sure that it made no sense, but I worried when I wrote this book, the thing I worried about most was the research. I worried that my research was going to be questioned. So I double and triple checked. I made copies. I had folders filled with research, both online and paper. And the comments I have gotten from the medical field, because I have received reviews from both doctors and nurses who said, for a fiction book, the way I portrayed, obviously not the surgical procedure,
Right.
but more of the emotional of what it's like to be a doctor in this situation, what you give up. It's like one woman who asked me never to tell her name, and I swore I wouldn't. She said, you know, this just cuts really close to home. And I've had people, you know, contact me just personally and tell me that I really hit it. I really did hit that emotion.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. I'm working with facts, but it just kind of made sense to me that if you do this much, you have to give up this much. You cannot, unfortunately, it's a lie when they say you can do it all, because you cannot do it all. You have to make a choice. And that's part of my whole premise, my whole conversation. Like, how do we make those choices? How do we give up on our husband and our daughter? How do we do that? And that's what I put Emma in, that position. And there are readers who hated her, but then there are readers who loved her. So
I was torn. I was conflicted with Emma's character, the same way that I'm sure a lot of other readers are. And that's why I couldn't stop turning the page, because I wanted to know, what is she going to give up and what is she going to give into? And if she does, how? What's going to be the trigger? Because she's got so many strings pulling at her and so many responsibilities. And, you know, though she gave her position to a younger doctor, in the end, no one could do what she could do. it was just, she was meant to. And so you kind of learn that as you go along and read the story without giving away spoilers to anyone. What would your advice be, Barbara, to writers and authors who are, just stuck with research and how to go about it?
It's interesting. There are conversations about research, and some authors like to research entirely and then start writing a book. And the other authors, and this is the category I fall into, research as you go, because there's only so much research you can take. There's only so much research I can take.
Right.
So I researched when I needed to. Other authors like to research everything all at once and get it over with. I just couldn't do it that way. So as I came across this, as I needed a medication, I needed to know, and you can find this. You can find this. This is what was used at this time, to help as a potential cure, as at least a slowing down of the tumor. This is what was done because the tumor is fast growing, and they did find even viruses. I found clinical studies where they found cold virus, pneumonia, and other things where they actually can inject that, and it helped to slow down the growth of the glioblastoma.
And you
I
mentioned
found that. Yes, and then that's all in the book, and I found it to be fascinating. But see, and then I did take, I had two different doctors who were not cancer specialists, but they were doctors that I knew. And I said, can you read this and tell me if does it make sense? Does this seem logical? And they, by far, they agreed with me. They said, yes, I tried. If I wasn't sure, I tried to be the least little bit vague, but if I could actually pin it down, then I let it out there, and it was the only way I could handle it without like kidnapping some cancer specialist and making him tell me everything he knew.
And Barbara's not the type of person who would do that anyway, because she's just so wonderful and lovely. So how did you craft these characters who are still living with me today? I can still feel Emma. I'm not.
Slowly, very slowly. And they came about organically. I think I've told you that initially Kate was my first point of view. And then I was working with this child. And of course, what bothered me about that was I wanted this to be women's fiction. Well, I couldn't have the main character be a child and have the book be women's fiction. But along with that, I meditate, and I'm really big on meditation. So I'm meditating one day, and all of a sudden the thought comes into my head that Kate needed a friend. Now, this was when they were children, before Kate was diagnosed with cancer. And that was Emma. And Emma came to me full blown. She came to me as the child who was driven, the child who would grow up and be the doctor. And then, of course, I always needed a bad guy. And that turned out to be, everyone hates Ned, who is Kate's father, but also Emma's mentor. But Ned was a good person who, through grief, went bad. And how human is that? I loved Ned because he was really easy to write, especially when he was bad, but which says maybe a little about me, I don't know, but I liked writing him. How human is it that we're not one-dimensional? We're not just good or just bad. And that's what Ned was, just like Emma. Emma was not good and not all bad. She was both. The only person who ended up being all good, in a sense, was Tim. But even then, he reached his limit. And the scene I wrote for him when he made his final decision, I thought was heartbreaking. It actually, every time I've read it, I tear up about it, because when he told Emma he was done, to me, that was, but he was probably the closest to an all good person I had.
Right.
Even Kate was not all good, neither was Emma. I mean, even as a child, and this is part of why Emma could not forget Kate, was because Emma loved Kate as her very best friend when they were children. Very best friend. You know what that's like. Very best friend.
Mhm.
But Kate was strong and Emma was not. Kate was the leader and Emma was the follower.
Follower.
Then Kate got cancer and Emma thought, now I will have her all to myself. She will be my very best friend for always. And then Emma watched how Kate suffered. And at first Emma thought, I wish it was me that had this tumor. I wish it was me that was dying. And then she saw how she suffered and she said, thank God it's not me. And she felt such guilt for feeling such a human reaction. How human is that, to feel, thank God it's not me? But yet it left her with a guilt that changed her whole life.
Well, how do you, with such intense characters, and each of them
Mhm,
have their own strong motivations, they have their
mhm.
shades of gray on the spectrum. They're not all good, not all bad. How do you handle their development, from the craft perspective? Do you have a system? Do
Honestly,
you have a process?
no. I just They just came and I rewrote. I am a total pantser. I'm getting better at plotting, at outlining. I don't know if your audience understands pantsing, but I just right by the seat of my pants.
Which
I
is the
literally,
definition of a pantster.
yes. And I think every writer experiences this to one degree or another, which is why I fight plotting so much. You write and all of a sudden it's your subconscious. It's the words just come and it is so magical. And it happens and it's not frequent and it's not always, but when it happens, it's the most beautiful thing in the world. And I spent a long time developing these characters. It's like they came in bits and they came in bits and pieces, but isn't that how we develop for real, in bits and pieces?
Oh my gosh, that's
Isn't
a powerful statement.
isn't that how
Yeah.
we truly develop? And that's how it happened. They like, oh wait, this if if this person does this, I never had the whole picture. It just came in little steps. But that's how people develop.
And we
And
continue to
that's how
grow.
my
We continue to grow, Barbara, in bits and pieces. That's right.
yes, yes. And that's how my characters developed. And I love them. And in fact, I will be honest, so many writers had a hard time. Well, by the time we hit COVID, obviously my book was already written and was being published. It wasn't out yet until August, but I was working on my second book. And so many authors have not been able to write because of COVID, because they can't get past what we've lived through. But it was my salvation. Writing has been my salvation. It's like I can just bury myself in with my characters, and it's like that's what I'm thinking. I could be looking at you and talking to you, but in my head I'm thinking, oh, what is this person going to do now? Because it comes in bits and pieces. And I will write down like 2 words. I will write down 2, and that will jog my memory for when I get back to writing. And I write every day, 7 days a week. I just can't seem to
Not read.
Well, I do read. I write every day, but then I save like an hour at night
Yeah.
because there's a lot of reading. Like people ask me to read their books. I want to read their books. Um, People ask for, for help. I want to help. So I spend time doing that. Um, I'm a busy person.
With all the social media and the writing the next book, tell us really quickly before we wrap up, what's your next book about? Because I'm really excited. And you mentioned Miss Maggie.
Yes, Miss Maggie, this is Miss Maggie's story. And what it is, it takes place, it starts in 1949, and Miss Maggie suffers a great loss, and she ends up being a 16-year-old pregnant teen whose family kicks her out of the house. It's 1949. This happens. It still happens today, unfortunately. Um, so she grows up. She has many, many hardships. And the story takes her through her own personal growth, how she grows from this lost teenager to a strong, independent woman. She ends up meeting, because it is a prequel to Nowhere Near Goodbye, she meets Emma when Emma is an infant and she is 60 years old. And it evolves from there in terms of her being Emma's person. She is the person that Emma seeks out as she goes through her drama, which is all a part of Nowhere Near Goodbye. There is Miss Maggie is thrown in there. She's woven in, and she is the person that Emma comes to when she's faced with difficult decisions. For example, when she was faced with, do I let Allie have this experimental procedure or do I not? And Miss Maggie says, so what are the results? What difference does it make? What will happen? Well, she'll either die or she won't. And Miss Maggie, who is blunt, says, well, I would think the not dying part is a better decision than the go ahead and let her die part.
Right.
And that's who Miss Maggie is, but it's her growth.
Right.
I found her to be so fascinating. And of course, she's a little Italian woman. So,
Wow. I can't wait to read that book. So,
oh,
yes,
thank you.
waiting to get my hands on that book. But thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone, for joining us. And overnight success, or so-called overnight success, is really not overnight. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes when an author like Barbara becomes a USA Today bestseller, and we all think, wow, how did she get there? Well, if you read the book and you read the amount of research, development of characters that went into it, and how impactful that book and story is, you'll understand that the overnight success has been many, many nights of thinking, developing, as Barbara has clearly told us, and of course, keeping yourself going, because it's the best that you can do as an author, because that's what you have control over, really.
Yes. And can I just add one little
Yes.
thing? If there's any new writers listening to this, I just want to say one thing. Don't give up. Just do not give up. The very first person who read my book said, maybe you need to take a break. That's how bad it was. And I did take a very tiny break, but I never gave up. I just kept writing and learning and taking classes and talking and reading. So don't ever give up.
And
That's
give us one writing tip. Give us a writing tip to add to that. A craft, anything that you want.
um writing classes. I'll tell you what, one of my best tips and one of the things I regret the absolute least is joining a writing group. And I'm talking about a big writing group. I'm talking about Women's Fictions Writers Association. The best thing I ever did was join that organization. I learned about other authors. I learned about the availability of craft classes. I learned about craft books. I learned about how hard it is. I learned about what it's like to actually just sit down and cry and have another author basically say, I've been there, I've done it, you'll survive it. It cost $48 a year. It's the best $48 I ever spend. And I tell everybody this. And that is my number one tip, that and don't give up.
Well, thank you,
The two
Barbara.
most important things.
Thank you. And you'll find the links to the Women Fictions Writers Association below the YouTube video. Purchase links to Barbara's books, her website. And just to let you know how impactful the organization is, that is where I found Barbara and many, many other authors who I could gel with, correlate with, and find my own little group and band and tribe, so to speak, because nobody understands writers the way another writer does.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. And I'm so happy I met you.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. Likewise, I'm just so thrilled I met you and I read your book and I was like, wow. So if you haven't got your copy, you know what to do. As soon as you finish watching this video, click the link, buy the book, start reading, and write a review for Barbara, because that's the best thing you can do for an author, is share your thoughts on what you found the book to mean. Because sometimes your review can help others find the book they need in their life. So thank you so much, Barbara. We really, really loved having you on Story Mantra, and
Thank you.
waiting for your second book now.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.